What if Naruto was banished and became the Akatsuki leader? Part 2. If you enjoy this, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Disclaimer, I don't own this What If nor Naruto. It was the middle of the night and the Akatsuki was up late. Staring out his window at his darkened city seemed to calm him down and help him to relax. The nice view was an abrupt change from his stressful day. Snow was really quite beautiful after nightfall, although sadly few people ever noticed. The redhead was actually in a fairly calm mindset, something that he had gradually perfected over the years. However, his calm demeanor had changed the instant those 6 Konoha stepped into his office. What did they want? Gar could identify them all: Kakashi Hatake, Sakura Haruno, Neji Hyuga, Tonati Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shikamaru Nara. Not exactly the people he wanted to see right now. They were from Konoha, a village that was vile and untrustworthy in his opinion. After what they had done to Naruto, his opinion of the village had quickly diminished. Needless to say, he was now in a foul mood. Gaara was not on the best terms with the Hokage and held off visiting Konoha for as long as possible while still keeping the treaty. A treaty that he was now beginning to rethink. And now they barge into his office and tell him that they come to take Naruto back to Konoha? Ha, well that's not gonna happen, you ungrateful leaf shinobi. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. He could almost feel the shock waves of tension travel throughout the room. That was never a good sign. But, why did the Akatsuki react like that? He must know something. A broken Tamari, who had just entered the room, looked at them with an unfathomable expression. Gar knew that she often stayed up late, though he had no idea why she was here. Tamari just leaned against the wall without a word. The 2 siblings had the exact same look on their face, blank, but somehow hinting at distrust. They obviously didn't want to give a single thing away. The leaf shinobi were visibly confused at their reactions. Gaara was internally surprised at how direct the leaf was. They definitely expected to just have Naruto handed over to them. The redhead's eyes shifted off to the side. Well, if they're looking for Naruto, I'm not going to make it any easier for them. If he wants to go back, then fine. If not, there is nothing that Konoha can do about it. Why? He asked sharply, why are you looking for Naruto Uzumaki? We have orders to bring him back to Konoha and protect him from the Akatsuki. He is from Konoha originally, and so it would be best for us to take him back there. Neji was the one who spoke. Gar considered that they wanted to protect him, but did not change his mind. All he did was stare at the leaf nins with that infuriatingly emotionless face. Tamari began to toy with one of her fans, flicking its deadly edge in and out of sight. Are we talking about the same shinobi that you banished 5 years ago? The Akatsuki had apparently struck a sensitive spot. All of the Konoha looked ashamed. Kiba was about to argue the point, but Gaara raised a hand to silence him. Kakashi was obviously annoyed but said nothing. Furious red eyes flashed in a shadowed corner of the room. The motion was missed by all but one of the room's occupants. Gaara's eyes flicked over to that spot, but his searching gaze found nothing amiss. Unknown to the shinobi, a small red fox slipped out of the window of the Akatsuki's office, seething with anger. He ignored the rest of the conversation and leapt to the ground. Q's 3 tails spiraled furiously in agitation as he stalked through the shadowed streets. Those ungrateful humans are broken bar, expecting my kit to be handed over to them just like that. Expecting him to once again rejoin their village after just few kind words and empty promises. The fox spat. He had always hated Konoha, now more than ever. Yes, he knew this was coming, but those cocky nins from Konoha acted so superior, as if they had some kind of a claim on Naruto. They thought that his kid was some kind of idiot who loved Konoha no matter what. Ridiculous. Even though he didn't intentionally attack Konoha that night so many years ago, he was suddenly quite satisfied that he did. Oh, how Q wished that he could just sink his teeth into their flesh, and let them drown in their own blood. But no, it was never quite that simple. Q reluctantly suppressed his bloodlust and headed back to the inn. The next day came quickly. Naruto got up at the crack of dawn, as he often did, and found Q snuggled into his side, still asleep. It's hard to picture Q as a demon when he's in a cute little form like that, Naruto thought, and he plays the role so well. Putting his thoughts aside, the blonde slipped out of the room and away from the inn. Being in close proximity to unknown people always made him uneasy, even as a young child. Naruto leisurely made his way to the Kazekage's private training grounds, which Gaara allowed him to use as much as he'd like. Who knew a former psychopath could be so generous? Over the course of the next few hours, Naruto practiced some jutsus and pounded multiple training dummies into piles of dust. He even used shadow clones to spar against, though he made sure to only use about a quarter of his true strength. He also resisted using powerful jutsus or ones he had picked up since become the Akatsuki leader. Signature jutsus could easily be recognized, and no one needed to know his true strength or his real identity. People could be watching him anywhere and everywhere, so the less they knew the better. Naruto paused, panting, and looked up at the sky. By the position of the sun, he figured it was around 9 o'clock in the morning. He should probably head back to the inn. Maybe he and Q could have some fun before he was captured. But, a few minutes later, he figured that it would be a good idea to check in with Gaara before he did much else. He was in Gaara's village, after all, so he had to show at least some respect. They all thought he was some kind of homeless wanderer, so the more appreciation he showed the better. Another thought suddenly caused Naruto to cast a weak genjutsu that would prevent anyone from seeing what he was doing. He crouched down, although to anyone on the outside it would have looked like he was still standing up and staring off into space. A deceiving jutsu like this was always useful when he needed to be away from prying eyes. The Shinobi performed about 50 hand signs that were too fast for the unaided human eye to follow. He then pressed his hands together and started to channel chakra into his eyes, much like someone with a Kekkai Genkai like that Sharingan or Byakugan would. Naruto gently closed his eyes and then suddenly opened them after a few seconds. Instead of seeing the sand of the Kazekage's training grounds, however, he was now looking at a place far outside of Suna's walls. A large sand dune made a small camp nearly invisible to passerbys. Naruto squinted and his vision moved further, and he could make out the outlines of two people who were crouching next to each other. Their features became clearer and clearer, and he could tell that they were in a deep conversation. "Ichi, Ki-same," Naruto stated. The two men's heads whipped up from their conversation and looked around for any signs of an intruder. They quickly realized that no one was there. You see, this is one of Naruto's original jutsus. By keeping perfect concentration on the flow of chakra into his eyes, he was able to transport his vision virtually anywhere he wanted to. Even though his physical body was still within Suna, Naruto could see Ichi and Ki-same's camp as if he was standing right there. Another added bonus, he could speak to them. Even if someone were to completely scan the area for his chakra signature, they would find none. Ah, the perks of being a Shinobi master. Leader-sama, Ki-same and Ichi greeted him respectfully once they had caught on. Only the Akatsuki had the ability to sense his presence when using this jutsu. Otherwise they'd probably think that they were going crazy. "Is there any news from our sources?" Naruto asked them, referring to a secret ongoing mission that had been planned for quite a while now. Ichi shook his head, eyes cast slightly downward. The man obviously held great respect for Naruto, something that could not be said for most of his previous superiors. "Okay. Please inform me when there is word," the Akatsuki leader instructed. With a quick goodbye, he dismissed the jutsu and found himself back in the middle of Suna. Naruto quickly noted that his flawless genjutsu was still holding up. Running a finger over the edge of a kunai, Naruto drew blood. He brushed the dripping finger against a pale mark on his arm. The mark looked much like a scar from a nasty bite, which is exactly what it was. Kyuubi had bitten Naruto and by doing that gave him a way of summoning the beast if he wasn't near him. Now that came in handy. If you looked at the mark closely, you would be able to make out small gashes that greatly resembled Q's razor-sharp teeth. Within a few seconds, the cut on his finger had healed, but the message had been sent. An almost unnoticeable rush of wind blew past Naruto's body, and he greeted the small red fox that was now sitting on his shoulder. "Hey, Q. I think it's time for us to check in with Gaara. Maybe we'll get to enjoy out time here before having it interrupted by some annoying gnats from the leaf." Agreed. Ah, being summoned is so invigorating. Naruto left Q to his own thoughts. The blonde shinobi turned and headed towards the Kazekage's tower. On the way there, he conversed with Q, determined to enjoy any free time they had left. It wasn't until it was too late that he suddenly noticed the 6 distinct chakra signatures that had just appeared behind them. Naruto didn't even need to look back to know who those people were. Q got wind of them too. "Oh. Shit. Well, this is annoying." "And Naruto?" asked a hesitant voice from behind them. Naruto steeled his emotions and strengthened all of his mental barriers. With obvious reluctance, he slowly turned to face the shinobi from Konoha. All of the leaf nins had just woken up for the day and were going to meet with the Kazekage again. Last night he had dismissed them fairly quickly and told them that it was too late for such talk. Although he seemed awfully glad to get rid of them, they were definitely not going to give up. At least Gaara had directed them towards a suitable place to stay. Kiba was attempting to make conversation with Hinata when they suddenly heard a gasp. The two spun around and were joined by Kakashi, Neji, and Shikamaru. The gasp had come from Sakura. Everyone stared at her, wondering why tears had started to form in her eyes. The pink-haired kunoichi was visibly trembling, and her breath was coming out in short gasps. Sakura's complexion had also paled considerably. Neji ran to his teammate in an instant. Her eyes were focused on one point and she didn't even give any notice that her teammates were all looking at her. "Sakura, what is it?" the Hyuga asked quickly, concern visible in his eyes. Kiba looked at Sakura with the same question plastered all over his face. Kakashi had the sense to turn his head to look at whatever had captivated her attention. His one eye widened and his body stiffened in shock. Sensing the change in the man, Hinata looked from him to Sakura, desperately trying to figure out what was wrong. And then her gaze landed on what they were both staring at. Now it was her who had to restrain herself from fainting. Standing maybe 20 feet in front of them was the unmistakable form of the object of their visit, Naruto Uzumaki. He seemed to be staring out into space as he walked casually along the abandoned road. Sakura suddenly felt warm tears begin to spill out of her eyes. She had never expected to get this emotional. Here was her teammate, standing a short distance in front of them. "Naruto. I have finally found you." Now the entire team of Konoha shinobi were staring wide-eyed at the back of Naruto Uzumaki. He was right there. Kiba's eyes filled with excitement, while Neji's took on a hint of uncertainty. Kakashi's emotions were unreadable. Even Shikamaru was caught off guard by Naruto's sudden appearance. "And Naruto?" Sakura called out in a shaky voice. The shinobi in front of them suddenly stiffened. His shockingly blonde hair began to sway in the wind. And then he turned. It seemed as if time slowed down just at that moment. More and more of his face became visible as he turned to face them. Sakura almost collapsed to her knees. Here he was, her teammate, her friend. He was here. He would be in her life once again. Sakura's hopes rapidly began to rise. Their gazes all locked onto his face. Naruto slowly turned around to look them in the eyes. And then sent them a glare that could freeze hell itself. Everything was quiet. The usual sounds of birds chirping, people murmuring, and children squealing all seemed to melt away under the intense atmosphere. The area was invaded with absolute silence. The two groups involved were standing no more than 20 feet apart, but the distance could have been miles. One icy glare sliced through the air like a kunai and embedded itself into 6 hearts. You could hear each individual breath, one shaking with unshed tears. But, as usual, the silence was soon broken. "Naruto!" shouted Kiba obnoxiously as he took a step toward the blonde. He seemed to be oblivious to the deadly glare that said blonde was giving him. "So it's really him?" A broken bar. Neji stood back and successfully resisted the urge to hug Naruto. So much for being an emotionless Hyuga. Hinata felt a shudder run through her spine. He broken bar has a broken bar, he's actually here. Shikamaru was busy examining the changes in Naruto since he saw him last. He took in the slightly longer hair, as unruly and bright yellow as ever. He saw the familiar whisker-like marks that hadn't faded with time, which may have actually become bolder. The nondescript ninja outfit that Naruto wore obviously was new or something, because it didn't seem to be worn or torn in any places. Naruto had definitely matured throughout the years. He had grown much taller and was now well muscled. But it was the eyes that really got him. Blue eyes so cold and full of hate that they seemed to pierce right through him. Eyes that seemed to reflect that aura of pure hatred that now surrounded Naruto. Shikamaru took a step back. Naruto focused his glare on Kiba as the ignorant Inuzuka bounded towards him. He sensed so much killer intent at Kiba that the boy froze in his tracks. If there was one thing that Naruto knew all about, it was killer intent. He had experienced it his whole life and now possessed all of the killing intent of the nine-tailed fox demon. Let's just say that's a lot of killing intent. Of course, he only used a small amount on Kiba. Kakashi watched as Kiba suddenly halted in his actions and dropped to one knee, breathing heavily as if his lungs were being restricted. The copy nin's previously overjoyed expression slowly melted into one of disbelief, and then of horror. Sakura stopped her pointless whimpering and tried to suppress the tears that were still so close to spilling over. This is it. We're finally here. Naruto a broken bar, he's right there. Now we can bring him back to Konoha. Oh, we're so close. They all stared at Kiba's crumbled form. The Konoha shinobi were clueless until realization gradually began to seep into their minds. Their expressions distorted into those of horror. This was Naruto's doing. Naruto, what did you do? Yelped Hinata, failing miserably to mask her emotions. Why would he hurt Kiba? Naruto just gave them that same intense glare, as if trying to communicate his undying hatred for them and their village. It had been enough for Konoha to send anyone to find him, but that whole Tag Hokage had enough nerve to send his old team and ex-friends? Stay away from me, was his barely audible reply. His voice sounded strange and hoarse. What? Shikamaru asked. He had not been planning on an angry Naruto. Why is he acting like this? You heard me. Stay away from me. In the blonde Jinchuriki's voice was a thinly veiled warning. His words were as sharp as Senbon needles. Neji was at Kiba's side in an instant. The Inuzuka seemed to have gotten over what they now knew was exposure to a strong killing intent. But for someone as experienced as Kiba to collapse after such a short glimpse of deadly intent, a broken bar, that would take a lot. Kakashi glanced up wearily at his former student. What's wrong with him? Hinata drew upon some unknown source of confidence and approached Naruto. Come on Naruto, snap out of it. We're here to bring you back to Konoha. At her words Naruto visibly stiffened. He was practically trembling from the effort of controlling his rage. Fury shone in his cerulean blue orbs, a stark contrast to his Genin days. A deep voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Calm down, Kit. Remember, we have to act our parts in order for the plans to succeed. You can't lose control. Naruto tried to follow Q's warning. It was just so hard. The very people who indirectly betrayed him were standing before him, unknowingly feeding the flames. I will never go back to that village again. What reason could I possibly have for going back to that disgusting place? He snarled. All six nins were taken aback. Who was this? Where was the Naruto they knew and loved? Na broken bar and Naruto. What are you saying? We broken bar, we finally found you after all this time and you're saying that you don't have broken bar want to come back to Konoha? That's a broken bar crazy. Kiba panted in between ragged breaths. Don't even say the name of that traitorous village. I don't want anything to do with it, Naruto hissed, voice laced with venom. Kakashi spoke up. Naruto, I don't know what's gotten into you, but it's been long enough. It's time to come home. But his words only bounced off of Naruto's hard exterior. He refused to believe that such a vile place was his home. Konoha was no home of his. Sakura, who now had a handle on her emotions, took a single step towards the blonde. A week ago she had been a powerful kunoichi, a force to be reckoned with, but now a broken bar. Now she just felt like a sobbing civilian woman. What's happening to me? Why do I feel like this? Kakashi placed a hand on her shoulder, restraining the pink-haired woman from moving any further. He didn't want to take the chance of Naruto hurting her. Who knows what the blonde deluded himself into thinking about Konoha. I am not coming back to a broken bar. Konoha broken bar with you. That village betrayed me. You betrayed me. I don't ever want to go there again. Naruto spat. Memories of his heartless banishment snaked themselves into his mind, invading all other thoughts and contaminating them with hate. They were responsible for this. They did this to him. Naruto knew he might have overestimated his ability to keep himself under control. Kiba decided to try again, and despite Neji's efforts to calm him, the conversation started to become heated. Stop this, Naruto, it's ridiculous. We betrayed you? The only ones who did any betraying here were that stuck-up council. They acted on their own, not from the Hokage's orders. Despite his shaken state, he was still able to reason clearly. Kakashi could see the fury that Naruto was trying so hard to suppress. He slowly rearranged his features into a more indifferent expression, though his insides were still a churning mess. What happened to you, Naruto? Meanwhile, Naruto was now shaking uncontrollably. How dare they say that? Such a stupid trick. Do they really think that I'll come back to Konoha, all happy and grateful, just because the Hokage put some kind of spin on the story? I know better than this. Of all the things they could do to try to get me back, they lay a broken bar. Naruto felt fury saturate his entire being. They had no right. They crushed his hopes and dreams mercilessly and were now trying to shift the blame. Those bastards. Calm down. Q tried to reason with the blonde, but it was too late. He was too far gone. Naruto's pupils narrowed and lengthened, taking on a feral quality. His blue eyes sparked with random flashes of red. His canines elongated and sharpened, almost drawing blood from his lower lip. Kiba, annoyed now, took a careless step towards him. That did it. Rage surged through Naruto. His pure hatred for Konoha, followed by the hurt of betrayal, urged him to fight the Shinobi in front of him. To kill them. The thirst for blood threatened to overwhelm him. Bam! Kiba flew back and slammed into the side of a building. Sand-colored bricks rained down around him and dust rose up into the air. The brunette Shinobi hacked and coughed up blood. Akamaru yelped and ran to his master, getting into a defensive position around him. Heads whirled around to stare at Naruto. He hadn't seemed to move at all. Taking in his increasingly feral appearance, Kakashi knew trouble was brewing. This was not good. What are you doing? Sakura cried. He's your friend. Was my friend, not is. You all betrayed me the moment I was banished from Konoha. Naruto spat the word out like poison. You aren't listening. It wasn't us. Tsunade-sama didn't, but Hinata's next words were cut off by the knee being thrust into her stomach. That was soon followed by a sharp tap on her forehead, and the female Hyuga passed into unconsciousness. Neji stared at his cousin. How had Naruto done that? So fast, a broken bar, but before he was even able to get into a fighting stance, Naruto appeared right in front of him. Eyes not blazing crimson, the blonde spoke. You are no friends of mine, he said in a slightly demonic voice before disappearing from sight. Before the Hyuga even had time to even react, let alone get into a fighting stance, a fist exploded into his face. The sickening thud of flesh connecting with flesh echoed around the Kazekage's training grounds. Neji slumped to the floor, unable to move. How was I defeated so easily? And he's only using Taijutsu? I am an expert in Taijutsu? This should not be happening. Sakura gasped at the sight of 3 of her teammates lying on the ground. Naruto. Why are you doing this? She asked while quickly sealing her emotions away and getting into a fighting stance. She didn't want to hurt him, but if it came to that, a broken bar before he could answer, Naruto vanished, only to reappear a moment later about 10 feet back. A shadow flew out across the ground and reached the spot where he was standing previously, only to retreat after missing. A frustrated Shikamaru stepped back into sight. How did he see that coming? Barely anyone is fast enough to evade my shadow. Kakashi resigned himself to what he had to do. Purposefully ignoring the fact that the cold shinobi in front of him had once been his carefree student, a kid with limitless potential and endless kindness, he performed some hand seals. Naruto's strong frame shook with a vicious tremor, and then faint red flow began to outline his body. Sakura paused, knowing that the Kibai was now influencing his thoughts. She naively chose to believe that it was the demons doing all along and that the Naruto she had once known was just buried somewhere deep inside. What a clueless girl. Shikamaru made the familiar hand signs for his family's jutsu once again, lashing out at Naruto with his quick shadow. Ironically, he really hadn't moved since he'd first seen Naruto. What a lazy shinobi. If I can just get a hold of him, then we don't need to injure him. Boom. The sound barrier let out a groan as the unsuspecting Nara was sent flying, slamming through a couple of desert trees as if they were not even there. Idiot human, a broken bark, Q thought, reining in the fiery chakra tail that he had struck Shikamaru with. Although he didn't want things to get out of hand, he truly enjoyed causing bodily harm to others. It just gave him such a broken bar warm, fuzzy feeling. Naruto sent a quick glance over to Q, and then figured out what their next step would be. Kakashi and Sakura were the only ones conscious, so he would have to be knocked out by them. He would purposefully just be a bit too careless and leave an opening in his next strike, which would allow one of them to knock him unconscious. It really was the only way. Q, here's what we'll do. Naruto quickly communicated his thoughts to the small fox. Somehow, Q had managed to remain hidden so well that none of the Konoha shinobi even had the slightest idea that he was there. This was perfect because then Q could watch over Naruto's unconscious body to make sure that he remained unharmed. Suddenly, Naruto's sense screamed at him to move. Without even thinking about it, the Jinchuriki stepped out of the way. A moment later, Kakashi flew out of the ground below where Naruto had previously been standing, blue chakra flaring wildly in his hand. Chidori! The Jounin exclaimed, and the air was filled with the sound of numerous chirping birds. The electricity in Kakashi's bomb, although still very strong, was toned down considerably from his normal version of the move. He's going easy on you, Q stated. Dodging the incoming attack with ease, Naruto flipped backwards and somehow landed a kick on Kakashi's unguarded leg. There was a sickening crack and a grunt of pain on Kakashi's part. Naruto whirled around, only to find Sakura blocking his path. Her emerald green eyes were shimmering with some kind of emotion, but Naruto had no time to try to decipher what they were. The only thing on his mind right now was her chakra-fueled fist that was now coming dangerously close to his body. Lithely leaping out of the way, Naruto landed on one of the few training dummies that hadn't been cut down. He flipped through about 20 hand seals and then placed one on the pale scar on his arm. Kitsune Soul Extension, were the words that he muttered quietly. Now Q could remain in the fox body even when his Jinchuriki was unconscious. Naruto's flesh throbbed for an instant, and the scar, which was actually a bite from the Kibai, let out a flash of red chakra before once again becoming dormant. Kakashi saw Naruto performing an unfamiliar jutsu, but he couldn't reveal his Sharingan in time to study it. Grimacing with pain, the copy nin made his way over to Sakura. The kunoichi remained in her emotionless but not state and charged at her ex-teammate again after a brief word with her sensei. In the small amount of time that Naruto left them, the two had quickly thrown together a plan. I hope this works. A broken bark Q watched the battle from his hiding spot behind one of the sparse trees. He hoped that Naruto knew what he was getting himself into. Time seemed to slow down as Naruto reacted too slowly to the oncoming strike. The pink-haired kunoichi aimed for his stomach once again, except knowing that her strike would be avoided this time. Just as Kakashi and Sakura had planned, Naruto leapt backwards in an attempt to distance himself from his opponents. Kakashi chose this moment to whisper, "Ground strike, descend." The silver-haired shinobi suddenly sunk into the ground as if it were a lake. He completely disappeared from view in a matter of seconds. The sand then molded back into its original shape as if he had never been there in the first place. Sakura kept pursuing Naruto, constantly lashing out with her chakra-enhanced fists that kept getting closer and closer to connecting with his flesh. And then, just as Naruto twisted out of the way of one of her strikes, a hand shot out of the ground below him and firmly gripped his ankle. Eyes widening, Naruto couldn't do anything as he was slammed into the ground. He struggled pointlessly, knowing that it would be impossible for the Naruto that the Konohans knew to escape this grip that was similar to that of a drowning man. And he couldn't show them his real power just yet. This was hardly even a warm-up for him. Oh well, he still had to play along. Another hand shot out of the ground and held Naruto in place. And then came the more frustrating part for Naruto. He saw the ground ripple and Kakashi's foot appear a moment later, but he couldn't do anything about it. He was forced to watch as the Jounin kicked him in the chest from that strike from below, unable to do anything due to his situation. Shikamaru snapped back into consciousness just as Kakashi's foot collided with Naruto's restrained body. Troublesome, he thought as the helpless blonde was pummeled by the strike. As the target of their mission flew back from the force, Sakura appeared behind him, roughly striking at his neck. Ha, at least I gave them a few nice injuries to remember me by. Be careful, was the last thing Naruto said before he allowed himself to be knocked out. Too bad the Konoha team was not privy to that detail. The Uzumaki's form lost its fox-like characteristics and returned to his normal human appearance. A panting Kakashi rose out of the ground and it rippled as if it were some kind of strange liquid. The copyman then walked over to Sakura, who was gently lowering Naruto's body to the ground. Sadness shone in her eyes as she looked at his unconscious face. The Metakanin then absent-mindedly brushed a strand of blonde hair out of his eyes before whispering, "Don't worry, Naruto, you'll be safe with us." With a last look at his sleeping form, Sakura turned and made her way to see to the health of her other teammates. Her mind, however, just kept returning to the man she had just knocked out. Kakashi surveyed the damage that they had done. Too bad he didn't realize it was the Kazekage's private training grounds a bit sooner. And by the way things went the previous day, the Kazekage probably wouldn't be happy about this. Come to think of it, why didn't Gaara mention Naruto to us earlier? We're in alliance, so he should have told us that. Kiba and Tanada were still out cold from those powerful strikes from Naruto. Neji was slowly waking up, blinking frantically when he realized where he was. Shikamaru stumbled over to where he was played out on the ground. Suddenly, something compelled the Nara genius to look up. He did, and saw a crowd of about 20 people staring at them wide-eyed. They had just fought another shinobi with Insuna, and attacked him 6-1. This definitely didn't look good. And on top of that they had just caused immense damage to the Kazekage's private training area. Crap. Shikamaru was about to alert his teammates to their audience when the crowd's hushed whispering suddenly ceased. Neji looked back at them. A single figure was making its way to the front. People dutifully parted to let him through, sending glares in the direction of the Konoha shinobi. Shikamaru cursed under his breath at the flash of red hair. This was bad. Gaara, the Kazekage, had just appeared out of the mass of people. Eyes flickering first to the damage to his property and then honing in on Naruto's unconscious form, he began to walk towards them. The sand around his feet quivered as he passed. Gaara was livid. Kakashi felt his throat close up when he looked up and saw a very pissed off Gaara approaching them. He could practically sense the fury that was sweeping off of the Kazekage in waves. The redhead stopped his approach when he was within a short distance from all of the Konoha shinobi. Kakashi saw movement below him and turned his head to look at it, only to see sand steadily covering Naruto. The blonde's form then sunk into the sand and appeared next to Gaara. The Kazekage then released his control on the sand, leaving Naruto laying on the ground beside him. Temari conveniently appeared out of the crowd, pushing through the villagers until she laid eyes on her brother and Naruto. Without a word, She ran over and knelt at her friend's side, making sure that he was okay and not physically injured in any way. "You have some explaining to do." Gar's ice-cold voice cut through the uncomfortable silence. He directed his words at Kakashi, since the copy nin was supposedly the team leader. Kakashi bowed his head. "We apologize, Kazekage-sama, but you have to understand. We were coming to your office and ran into Naruto Uzumaki, the very person we were sent here to retrieve." Words didn't seem to be enough to persuade him, and Naruto lashed out at us, and we retaliated in turn. As you can see, we only knocked him out and did no actual harm. Wishing that he could just kill the man instead of being the Kazekage, Gar ran a hand through his hair. "Should I let them take him or not? What should I do?" It was Sakura who spoke up next. From their previous meeting, Gar could tell that she really did miss her teammate. Her intentions seemed to be pure and he trusted her a bit more than the rest of her teammates. "Please, Gar-sama, allow us to take him back to Konoha. We need to protect him from Akatsuki and there is no need for your village to be made a target unnecessarily." Weighing her words, Gar began to formulate his decision. "We don't want to hurt him. We just want to repair the damage that our village has done and keep him safe from Akatsuki. Do you want him to die? No. We need to bring him back with us. Tsunade-sama will provide the very best security and also pay for the damage we caused." Kiba, who had just regained consciousness, was the one who spoke. The crowd listened to his every word. It was a few minutes before the Kazekage said anything. Suddenly, his head snapped up and he looked Kakashi in the eye. "Kakashi, I am trusting you and your village to keep Naruto safe. If anything happens to him, your village will be held responsible. You may bring back Naruto Uzumaki on one condition." Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "Temari will accompany you on your trip. I myself cannot leave the village but I trust her enough to take care of herself and travel with you to make sure that you keep your word." Temari abruptly looked up, and then nodded. It was for the best. Besides, she hadn't been out of the area surrounding Suna in ages. Every conscious leaf Shinobi bowed their head and thanked him. "I hope I've made the right decision," Gar thought, casting a glance at the blonde laying by his side. While everyone's attention was directed at the leaf nins, a man materialized on the side of a desert tree. His glowing yellow eyes and unusual black and white complexion marked him as Zetsu. His Akatsuki cloak billowed in the wind, red clouds contrasting to the sandy ground. Somehow, he still managed to remain unseen. Zetsu took in the sight before him and saw the Shinobi from Konoha carry Naruto away. A few moments later, he began to melt back into the tree, moving with ease through seemingly solid material. Zetsu's last thoughts before he left were, "I will inform everyone that Leader Sama is now in the next stage of his plan. It's been so much more interesting with him as leader. Well, this is going to be fun. We're gonna make the Konohans return home a bit harder than they expected. Leader Sama always gives us the more enjoyable orders." 2 hours later, Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata, Neji, Shikamaru, Akamaru, and Kiba were standing at the gates of Suna. Their stay was up and they really didn't want to push their luck. The 6 Shinobi, being newly healed, were ready to start the journey back to Konoha. They each planned to take turns carrying Naruto, fully intending to keep him unconscious for the entire trip. At first, it hadn't sounded like the most practical approach but it ended up being the safest option. Sakura had injected Naruto with a special sedative that she assured them would keep him out for the entire trip. Right now Naruto was slung over Kakashi's shoulder as if he weighed nothing. Truthfully, it had taken the better part of an hour for someone to figure out how to remove weight on the special chakra seals that he wore. With one seal on each limb, he weighed much more than any of the 6 could carry for any amount of time. Neutralizing the seals had been the only option. As they were preparing to leave, Kakashi thought about the man who was once his student. He sighed, recalling the loud, hyperactive, unpredictable blonde genin that Naruto used to be. The silver-haired jounin was saddened that Naruto's hate for Konoha had been so strong. "Don't worry Naruto, we'll set this straight. You'll be safe in Konoha." After waving goodbye to the Kazakage, the 6 shinobi prepared to leave. There was a sudden gust of wind, and Temari appeared next to Shikamaru. They all glanced at her and then turned towards the gates once again. Sighs could be heard as they stepped out of snow and back into the barren desert. They had found Naruto, and now they had to bring him back to his home. Their mission was almost complete. Gaara watched the leaf shinobi until they were just small specks on the horizon. He still didn't trust them, but he trusted Naruto and his sister. Somehow, this would turn out for the best. Unknown to all of the shinobi, a certain small red fox was trailing after the group. With a flawlessly masked chakra signature, Q was pretty much invisible to the world. He was intent on his mission to protect his Jinchuriki, and he made himself a promise. If any harm came to Naruto, there would be hell to pay. And so the Leaf Nins and Temari began their journey back to the Hidden Leaf Village. Was fate dictating the end of their journey, or was it something else? Many more factors will soon come into play. Mysteries will want to be solved. And what will happen to our favorite deceitful blonde when he nears the very cause of his pain? 8 blurs flashed through the air, only touching the ground for a brief moment before launching back up with chakra-fueled steps. The sound of heavy breathing could be heard if one listened closely enough. The last of the desert sand was beginning to fade beneath their feet, quickly transitioning into mossy grass. The buffeting winds gradually mellowed out into a more mild, forest breeze. The amount of sunlight was slowly dwindling as the afternoon passed into evening. Dusk was approaching. Neji, Kakashi began, I think it's time for us to make camp for the night. Can you spot any suitable areas? Neji wordlessly activated his Byakugan. He had long ago mastered his family's bloodline, branch family member or not. The veins around his eyes bulged, creating a fairly intimidating profile. His pale lavender eyes gained the slight shadow of a pupil. Neji scanned the surrounding forest as the entire group came to a halt. Kakashi was flanked by Neji and Sakura. Behind him were Hinata, Shikamaru, Akamaru, and Temari, all positioned strategically around Kiba, who was currently carrying Naruto. They were all staring into the surrounding forest with varying degrees of interest. There, 40 meters northeast, there's a sheltered clearing that appears to be big enough for all of us, Neji stated. The Leaf Shinobi, and Temari, all turned towards that location and disappeared in an instant. To the untrained eye, they might not have even been there at all. A single leaf quivered where it had been brushed by Akamaru. A little while later, they had finished setting up camp and were getting ready to eat dinner. Everyone was sitting around a medium-sized campfire, watching the flames snap and hiss as they cooked their meal. Luckily, they had been able to catch some rabbits and a few larger animals. This area seemed to be relatively untouched by trappers and humans in general. Night had since fallen, creating a dark void of nothingness in the sky. It was especially eerie since no stars could be seen, which was unusual in these parts. The moon darted in and out of view timidly. Sakura stood up from their circle and separated herself from the rest of the group. Kakashi caught her eye and raised an eyebrow. Sakura just shrugged and said, I just thought I'd make sure that Naruto doesn't have any other injuries that we haven't seen. Tsunade-sama would like him to be completely healthy. Kakashi nodded. Shikamaru, who was watching their exchange, decided to comment. That sounds reasonable, Sakura, but just make sure that Naruto doesn't wake up. We don't need him throwing a fit and going all crazy on us. Don't worry, that won't happen. He'll definitely be out for a few more days before the effects of the sedative I gave him were off. I administered the strongest dose I could without causing any damage. The pink-haired Kunoichi then turned away, but not before the Nara genius caught the troubled look in her eyes. He couldn't stop his own face from mirroring that expression either. Naruto, a broken bar, what happened to you? Sakura stopped and looked down at the blonde shinobi with worried eyes. Naruto had always been so perpetually happy in their Genin days. He was always that ball of sunshine that all of his friends loved to be around. She knew many things about him back then. They had been pretty close after all. He was always unpredictable, loved ramen more than anything, was often hilariously clueless when it came to love, and dreamed of becoming Hokage one day. But a broken bar. What bothered Sakura now was that she was no longer close with Naruto. She couldn't even list a few things about him if she tried. Things have changed, things have really changed. The pink-haired Medicna knelt before her ex-teammate and placed a hand on his wrist. The steady rhythm of his pulse comforted her. It was just so unnatural to see Naruto laying there, completely still. Sakura just couldn't get the happy-go-lucky kid out of her mind. "Where did you go, Naruto? What happened to you?" Hesitantly, Sakura draws one finger along the back of his hand. She then grasps his hand in hers, and an odd feeling starts to form in her stomach. With the other hand she brushes Naruto's hair out of his eyes. Sighing, Sakura then began the medical exam. Placing both palms over his forehead, she began to concentrate. A blue-green glow began to appear around her hands as she gathered medical chakra. Sakura then moved her hand slowly across his face and down his neck. So far, there were no underlying injuries that had been overlooked. She wiped a bead of nervous sweat off of her face and continued with the exam. When the kunoichi got to his left arm, however, she frowned. "Kakashi, Hinata, take a look at this." The two-leaf shinobi looked up and walked over to her. Temari followed them. Kakashi stared at the strange mark that was on Naruto's left arm. It looks almost like a broken bar bite mark. "What do you think?" Hinata's eyes narrowed as she delved into thought. But wouldn't Naruto have healed from something like that? I remember how the Kikubai always used to heal him whenever he was injured or harmed in any way. However, this scar doesn't show any signs of healing. Temari nodded in agreement. It's as if it was permanently etched into his skin. Sakura breathed out in frustration. "I can't heal it either. What could have made a mark like this? It's 4 inches long? And look, you can see the individual teeth and fang marks." Kakashi didn't know what to say. He agreed with everything that was said, but still couldn't find a reasonable answer. Reluctantly, the copyman called Shikamaru over. After examining it for a minute, the lazy shinobi said, "I don't know why it isn't healing or anything, but it is definitely a bite mark. Look." He turned Naruto's arm over. "There's another one on this side, where the bottom of the jaws must have connected." All 5 shinobi were clearly puzzled. What bothered them the most was just how little they all knew about the shinobi in front of them. Over the past years, Naruto had become more and more of an unknown. They had no idea what he did or went through in the past 5 years, and had virtually no way to figure it out unless he told them himself. Kakashi's one visible eye looked to the ground as he tried to block out the memories of how he'd failed Naruto as a sensei. He had treated Sasuke much better, and the Uchiha had been the one to run away. Kakashi had made a serious mistake that he could just not forgive himself for. "Naruto, a broken bar, please let us set things straight. Now that we're finally bringing you back, maybe we'll have a chance to become close again." A broken bar. Shikamaru actually hadn't been very close with Naruto before he was banished. Sure, they were friends, but not best friends. Then again, Naruto probably considered everyone to be his best friend. Not anymore, was what Shikamaru thought sadly. He was just starting to get closer with the blonde before he left. Now Naruto was a whole different person. Yet another mystery to be solved. Hinata was struggling to resist the urge to reach out and touch Naruto. He looked so handsome in his sleep. Peaceful, almost. It saddened her to think of how he reacted so violently to their presence earlier. "Please accept us, Naruto," Hinata thought. "Please let us be your friends again. I never wanted our friendship to end. A broken bar, I liked you, Naruto, a lot. And now everything's confusing. That a broken bar, I just don't know what to do. Your banishment wasn't our fault, so please don't be mad at us." Hinata flinched internally when she saw Temari reach out and hold Naruto's other hand while Sakura finished the medical scan. The blue and green chakra faded from Sakura's palm. Everything else looks like it's normal. Surprisingly, there are no bruises or other injuries from our little skirmish with him. That caused Kakashi to reach down to rub his leg that Sakura had just mended back together. and Hinata to place a hand on the bruise that was beginning to form under her shirt. From that strong blow to her stomach, I really hoped to at least have bruised him, Kakashi thought. A moment later, Akamaru barked, signaling that the meat had finished cooking. All 7 conscious Shinobi and Akamaru grouped themselves around the fire. This was going to be a long night. It was a good thing that they had found a suitable meal. An owl hooted somewhere out in the distance. The sky was now completely black, only being lit occasionally by the fleeting glimpses of the crescent moon. Almost everyone was fast asleep inside of their tents or in their sleeping bags. Everyone except for Neji. The Hyuga was sitting in a tree, keeping watch. No one was going to get past him. The unconscious Naruto had been moved into one of the smaller tents with Kakashi so that he could be monitored and protected from any potential threats. Although they all hoped that there wouldn't be any attacks tonight, the small red fox perched in a tree a little distance away would have smirked evilly if he had heard what they were thinking. Suddenly, there was a rustling in the bushes a short distance away. Neji immediately activated his Byakugan and looked around. To his dismay, there was nothing out of the ordinary. A large squirrel scampered off. Neji sighed and relaxed back into the branch that he was sitting on. Suddenly, he felt a faint blur of chakra and jumped to his senses, once again activating his Byakugan. A moment later, only one sound could be heard. Boom! A huge explosion rocked the very roots of the forest. Plants disintegrated and trees shattered from the force of the blast. A huge shock wave traveled throughout the forest faster than the eye could see, leaving only death and destruction in its wake. Neji was thrown violently from his position and flew a good distance back. Shrapnel battered and bruised his body as shards of wood raced past him like deadly splinters. When the Hyuga finally landed, he had no control over his body. After skidding through the littered grass and into a large rock, he slumped to the ground and began to uncontrollably cough up blood. Dark laughter was the last thing Neji heard before he succumbed to unconsciousness. The loud explosion jolted Kakashi awake, his eyes flashing open at the ground-shaking boom. Sensing the urgency of the situation, the copynin leapt out of his tent in the blink of an eye. However, he didn't make it far before the destructive shock wave washed over the camp. The grass around them flattened as an incredibly powerful wind swept through the clearing. The very earth itself seemed to be torn apart. But this was no earthquake. Sakura and Hinata, who had been sharing a tent, were on their feet in an instant. After being rudely waken up by the blast, they had all of the power of pissed-off Kunoichi in the morning at their disposal. Wide emerald eyes met equally as dazed lavender eyes as they dropped to their knees from the sheer force of the explosion. It didn't take long for the shockwave to pass them by, and when it did, everyone was on high alert. Kakashi had to pull Temari out from under a fallen tree, much to the Sand Kunoichi's embarrassment. Kiba and Akamaru were already running a perimeter around camp to try to locate the attackers. Shikamaru, despite the loud blast that occurred only a moment ago, still appeared to be half asleep. Lazy-ass genius. The copynin was about to run out to find the intruders when he heard an intake of breath from Hinata. Everyone stopped what they were doing to glance at the female Hyuga. Wait, where's Neji? He was keeping watch. Oh my god, you're right! Cried Sakura. She reflexively tightened her gloves. Come on guys, we've got to find Neji and punish whoever it was that set off that explosion. Everyone nodded and ran in separate ways. Shikamaru went to check on Naruto, who would be helpless and unprotected since he was still unconscious. That could have just been an obnoxious distraction. Meanwhile, Kakashi, Sakura and Hinata ran to the source of the blast, with Temari following closely behind. Kiba and Akamaru stayed back with Shikamaru to guard the camp. No one knew what they would be up against, so they had to be prepared for anything. Sakura's eyes widened as she suddenly stepped out of the forest and into a startlingly barren field. They weren't even out of the forest yet, but the explosion had caused many trees to topple over, so now there was an enormous clearing occupying the area that used to be densely forested. This was bad. What kind of a person would have done something that was so catastrophic to the environment? Sakura felt Temari and Hinata appear next to her, their arrivals made known by only a small breeze. The pink-haired kunoichi glanced around for her sensei as well, only to find him standing in front of her when she turned back around. Frowning, Sakura stared at Kakashi for a minute before shrugging and looking around again. "Look at that!" Temari gasped with a mixture of wonder and horror. A large blackened crater in the middle of the new clearing immediately attracted their attention. Smoke was still coming off of the edges in small tendrils, leaving an acidic smell in the air. And then they say him. A man was standing in the middle of the crater. He wore an unmistakable cloak, one that was black adorned with bloodred clouds. A cloak that hadn't actually been seen in a few years. Straight blonde hair flew around his face, giving the man a slightly feminine look. One of the Akatsuki members' eyes was a pale blue, the other hidden beneath his bangs. And even though he was a good distance away from them, the shinobi could see the evil grin that slowly made its way across his face. Sakura and Hinata stiffened in horror. They knew that distinctive Akatsuki cloak anywhere. Kakashi breathed in and out, mentally preparing himself for battle. Temari whipped out her giant fan and got into a fighting stance. They knew this man anywhere. "Deidara," Kakashi's voice was laced with venom. "That's me, yeah. Did you like my art?" And with that, Deidara vanished from sight. He reappeared a moment later right in front of Kakashi. The copyman gritted his teeth and sent a punch in the Akatsuki member's direction. Hinata shouted Byakugan. And ran at Deidara, using only her hands as a weapon. Temari and Sakura followed, one using an enormous fan and the other using fists reinforced with chakra. The blonde dodged all of the attacks and reached into one of his pockets. Sakura's eyes narrowed into a glare, which Deidara caught. "Oh, don't worry," he said sarcastically, widening his eyes in mock innocence and holding up his hands as if surrendering. "I'm not going to cause any trouble." But everyone's attention was immediately drawn to the two hands, one on each of his palms. The Akatsuki member grinned dangerously as clay appeared in his hands. He pressed them into birds and then threw them at the shinobi. "Just kidding," he said, and then quickly added, "I really hope you guys can take a joke, yeah." The clay birds flew towards Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata, and Temari, honing in on their chakra signatures. A chuckle from Deidara let them know that something was going to happen. Kakashi looked up just in time to see Deidara forming a hand sign. "Watch out!" The copyman shouted as tons of mini explosions lit up the still dark sky. Hinata shrieked as one of the creatures latched onto her left leg and abruptly exploded. Her cry, however, was drowned out amidst the booms of many clay pieces blowing up. Smoke filled the air around the nin, causing them to cough and choke as they tried to breathe. When the smoke cleared, Sakura was horrified at what she saw. Off to her left, Hinata was laying in a pool of her own blood. More of the red liquid seeped from a deep wound on her leg. The bone was no doubt broken as well. Kakashi was shaking slightly, clutching at his head. Blood ran down from his forehead and into his eyes, slightly distorting his vision. How had this happened so easily to her seemingly invincible sensei? And then, after glancing around, Sakura spotted Temari. The sand kunoichi was kneeling on the ground and holding her arm. Temari's teeth were clenched and her eyes shut with pain. Soot blackened the half of her body that she had not been able to shield with her fan. Sakura didn't know what to do. Who should she heal first? Well, Hinata appeared to be unconscious. And since Kakashi looked to be the least injured, the pink-haired kunoichi ran towards him. Her path, however, was blocked by a certain annoying Akatsuki member. He grinned and sent more clay birds flying after her. Sakura dodged all of them, only to find that they circled back around. Gritting her teeth and reflexively tightening her gloves, Sakura made a run for Deidara. The blonde shinobi flashed out of the way, steadily avoiding her punches. Frustrated, Sakura formed the hand seals for a jutsu that she hadn't used in a long time. A simple jutsu that she always avoided using because of the memories attached to it. It was Shadow Clone Jutsu? Sakura cried. Two clones of herself suddenly appeared in a puff of smoke. They both narrowed their eyes and clenched their fists. mimicking the original's movements. Go! She yelled to her clones. One clone ran to Deidara and the other started to throw shuriken at the circling clay birds. The real Sakura sprinted to Kakashi and started to heal his head injury as fast as she could. Kakashi's head was healed in about a minute. "Thanks, Sakura," he said, then stood up and rubbed the blood off of his face. "I think it's time to put this guy back in his place. I really should have killed you all those years ago, Deidara." "We'll see about that, yeah," the Akatsuki member replied. "Too bad I can only injure the leaf shinobi. It would have been nice if Leader Sama allowed me to kill at least one." Kakashi and Deidara both vanished in blurs of speed. A cry of Chidori could be heard as Kakashi powered up his original move. Deidara immediately leapt backwards to put some distance between them. He was a long-range fighter after all. The copy nin lunged at Deidara, quickly closing the distance between them. Unable to do much of anything else, the missing nin formed a barrier out of clay which mostly absorbed the Chidori. Oh, and as another added bonus, it exploded in Kakashi's face. Deidara was blown backwards but remained unharmed. The same couldn't be said for Kakashi, who was panting as he wiped blood off of his arm and chest. Sakura wasted no time in healing her friends. She worked on Hinata's injuries with one of her clones because hers appeared to be more serious. The other pink-haired clone ran to Temari and began to heal her arm. The uniquely colored medical chakra instantly began to mend their flesh together. After a few minutes, however, Hinata still hadn't woken up. Sakura couldn't completely heal her leg without risking the chance that it might be positioned incorrectly since the break was so serious. Temari seemed to be doing alright and was actually very resistant to pain. Sakura chose to only stop the bleeding instead of completely healing the Sand Kunoichi's wound in case her chakra was needed later in the fight. Kakashi was still exchanging blows with the ever-elusive Deidara. Almost every punch he threw was blocked, much to Kakashi's frustration. Explosions echoed in the air every couple of seconds as the Deidara did what he did best. The missing nin's extra mouths made fighting him much more difficult because of the ability that they gave him. But Kakashi was not going to give up. "This is for Naruto," he thought as he landed a powerful hit on Deidara. Said man gripped his newly broken arm and glared daggers at the copy nin. "You will pay for this, Kakashi Hatake, you will pay. And I'll also make you pay for what your pitiful village did to Leader Sama. Now might not exactly be the best time for my revenge though. I'll have to wait until Leader Sama gives us permission to kill so it's a fair fight." So sad, I was just starting to enjoy this. Zetsu will be happy to know that his turn will be next. Deidara abruptly stopped fighting. Kakashi stiffened, awaiting another strike. When none came, he gave the blonde in front of him a confused look. "Sorry Kakashi, there's been a change of plans. But next time I see you, I'll kick your ass, yeah." Deidara then grinned at Kakashi, puzzling him further, and then turned around. Kakashi took this opening and flew at him, fist raised for a punch. Kakashi grabbed Deidara's shoulder and delivered a strong blow to his chest. Never turn your back on your opponent, Deidara. However, the leaf nin's victorious grin vanished as quickly as it appeared. The missing nin before him melted into clay. "Like I said, Kakashi, save it for next time," Deidara said from a hidden position, his voice echoing throughout the clearing. Kakashi's shoulders slumped in defeat and Sakura looked around, worried. Temari glared defiantly, hand-itching to just grab her fan and pummel the surrounding area. Hinata was still unconscious. A piece of white cloth flapping in the wind suddenly grabbed Sakura's attention. Hesitantly, the pink-haired medic nin made her way towards it, preparing herself for any kind of surprise attack. She pushed a fallen tree out of the way, expecting to find some kind of an enemy concealed beneath it. What Sakura saw, however, made her shriek in surprise. "Neji!" Kakashi was at her side in an instant. His eyes widened as he saw Neji's body lying before them. The pale shinobi's eyes were closed and he was eerily still. Neji's arms, which had obviously been used to block his face from the blast, were badly burned. Nasty-looking splinters stuck out of them in all directions. Blood covered most of his body, turning a portion of his previously white outfit a bloody red. The crimson liquid seeped out of multiple wounds that looked to be very deep. The overall sight was very gory. Sakura was now thankful that Hinata was unconscious and unable to see her cousin in such a condition. Handshaking, Sakura reached out to check his pulse. She sighed with relief when she felt the familiar rhythm, even though it was far fainter than she would have preferred. Kakashi released a breath that he didn't know he had been holding. Nejai's chest barely moved as he took shaky breaths. It took 10 minutes and a lot of chakra to stabilize Nejai enough to bring him back to camp. Sakura was now fairly tired but knew that she wouldn't be able to rest for a while after such an encounter. Kakashi carefully knelt down and lifted Nejai up into his arms. Temari took the hint and gingerly picked up Hinata. Sakura turned and followed them as they began to make their way back to camp. Although they were still unsure of why the missing nin ran away in the first place, everyone did their best to keep their minds on the task ahead of them. Shikamaru was sitting alongside Naruto. The blonde hadn't really been affected at all by the explosion. He was still laying on his back with his eyes closed due to his medically induced sleep. Shikamaru watched the man's chest rise and fall rhythmically as he guarded him. Naruto actually looked peaceful in his sleep. The Jinshu Uriki's face was relaxed and his mouth almost had the hint of a smile. What happened to him these past 5 years? We haven't gotten any reports or anything until recently when we found him in Sina, Shikamaru pondered, and Naruto doesn't appear to have any traveling companions, which is really weird since he was always the kind of person who naturally drew other people towards him. This is so frustrating. We barely know a thing about him. Naruto Uzumaki, I will solve your mystery. Too bad the Nar didn't know just how troublesome that might prove to be. A slight tremor rocked through Naruto in his sleep, abruptly catching Shikamaru's attention. Sitting completely still in a tree on the edge of the camp was a certain fox. Q was vigilantly watching over his defenseless Jinshu Uriki. No matter their intentions, he knew from experience never to blindly trust anyone from the leaf. Sure, that Nara genius was supposedly watching over Naruto now, but he remained at his vantage point regardless. It had actually been fairly amusing to see how the Shinobi reacted to Deidara's intimidating blast. Though the shockwave had just barely ruffled his fur, and yet it was funny how it managed to knock the leaf ninja to the ground and catch them completely off guard. The size of that explosion was actually pretty impressive, Q thought, mentally praising Deidara. That man sure had a way with explosives. The sound of heavy footsteps caught the Baju's attention. Q crouched low, wrapping his 3 tails around some small branches and pulling the foliage down to further conceal his bright red fur. He was immediately bathed and shadowed the perfect hiding spot. His crimson eyes flicked over towards the sound. Kakashi, that jounin from the leaf, was pushing his way through the forest with uneven steps. Blood stained his clothes and the copy nin looked like he had been through a bit of a beating. The tailed beast was beginning to like Deidara more and more, even if he could be annoying sometimes. Q also took note of the dark-haired Hyuga that Kakashi was carrying over his shoulder, who looked considerable worse than when he had started guard duty. Nejai really only looked half alive. Next came Sakura, who looked relatively unharmed, followed by Temari. Q's eyes narrowed when he saw that she was clutching her upper arm. Some blood was running through the cracks in her fingers and dripping onto the forest ground. Temari and her brothers had made his kid happy, and so there was no need for the girl to get hurt. She gave Kunoichi's a good name, and so he made a mental note to heal her in her sleep if that pink-haired medic nin didn't do it first. Temari was also carrying someone, Hinata by the looks of it. She didn't look like she was doing so well either. Deidara sure had a lot of fun. A moment after the 5 entered into camp, Kiba and his large white dog bounded into the clearing as well. Q wrinkled his nose in disgust as he thought what an overgrown mutt, and stared at the obnoxiously large Akamaru. Sure, Q may be beefed, but at least he knew how to take care of himself. It was a good thing he had put up a shield before suppressing his chakra so that Akamaru couldn't even smell him. Kiba wiped a hand over one of the fang-shaped red marks on his face, brushing away some dirt. The shinobi all began to converse and Q was at the perfect position to overhear every word. "Guys! What happened?" Kiba asked, his voice rising in alarm. He ran over to Hinata and pulled her down from Temari's shoulders. Akamaru ran to one of the tents and came trotting back with a medical kit between his massive jaws. Kakashi gently lifted Neji off of his shoulders and laid him next to his cousin. "Thanks boy," the Inuzuka said, patting Akamaru's head. Kakashi knelt down next to the two Hyugas and began to explain what happened. Kiba's eyes narrowed at the mention of Akatsuki. So they finally decided to show themselves. "But isn't it weird," Sakura interjected, voicing his thoughts, "that this is the first time we've seen them in years? They've been awfully quiet for a long time." Temari nodded in agreement. She might not exactly like Shinobi of the Leaf, but she wasn't going to be an idiot about it and get them all killed. "We haven't heard of them either in Tsuno for a while. Do you think it's because they couldn't fight Naruto before and are going after him now that we've found him?" Behind his mask, Kakashi pursed his lips in thought. That could be it. But how is it that we could find him and a powerful criminal organization couldn't? It just doesn't make sense. Pausing in his process of bandaging Hinata's leg, Kiba added, "Regardless of that, you know what we have to do." Sakura nodded. "It is definitely in Konoha's best interest to get Naruto back there as quickly as possible." Akamaru barked in agreement. Kakashi decided to bring up one more point. "And I still don't understand why Deidara just ran away like that. One moment he's causing trouble and attacking us, and the next he's running off and insisting we'll battle again some other time. What was that all about?" "Maybe," Shikamaru said as he emerged from Naruto's tent, "they were just trying to scare us. Akatsuki is probably trying to get the other hand by intimidating us and causing us to make stupid decisions." It was clear that the Nara had heard the whole conversation. Kiba nodded slowly. It made sense, after all. Shikamaru was really good at figuring these types of things out. "Well, we should probably get ready to move and not give Akatsuki the chance to attack again too soon. Let's try to put some distance between them and us, agreed?" A chorus of agreed followed this. And even though they had only got half as much sleep as usual, the Konoha Shinobi and Temari began the painstaking process of packing up camp. The sun would rise in an hour and they needed all the extra time they could get. Naruto's safety was just too important to put off. Kakashi couldn't stand losing another comrade due to his past. Sakura couldn't bear the thought of parting with her lost teammate again, and Temari wanted to make sure that her friend got to Konoha while remaining unharmed. Both Neji and Hinata needed a proper hospital and medical attention as well. Kakashi tried to keep his mind off of how Tsunade was going to yell at him for getting both Hyugas injured after someone from that clan no doubt worked up the nerve to complain. Still, everyone was eager to get to Konoha as quickly as possible. And so began the start of a very long day. Q watched the Shinobi pack up their stuff with the barest hint of interest. Finally, they'd be moving soon. He figured it would be a couple hours before Naruto woke up anyways. The fox really wanted to see the look on the Leaf Shinobi's faces when Naruto awoke roughly a day after Sakura administered the sedative, instead of the expected 3 or even 4 days. That would be fun. Though, sadly, Naruto probably wouldn't be able to injure them any further since he did have to actually get to Konoha at some point. The sooner they got there, the sooner he would be able to leave. The power of deception, Q sighed. There were some times when Q really was glad to have such a clever Jinshu Uriki. Being one of the few Bajuu who actually got along with their hosts made life so much more interesting. With that thought, the brilliant red fox leapt fluidly onto a different branch to get a better view of all of the activity going on below him. Nothing could get past the Kyubi's sharp eyes. Thank you for watching.